privilege and honor to speak here as the last speaker of the conference. So we are not in a rush anymore. And I have to mention something that I believe was not mentioned here during this panel, and that our panel is from panelists who all contributed to a book that just was published under the auspices of the Central European Publishing. So I do hope that if you get the chance, you will sit down and read that book, because you can read more about interdisciplinary communication with children in that book and in the publication. Now, I also have to mention that, well, I don't have to, but I want to mention that I have 2 degrees in law and the other one in Japanese and intercultural communication. And a lot of the times when I was studying these 2 universities, very, very different from one another, I was asked, why are you studying these 2 things? And, I really didn't have a good answer, except because I want to. I love languages, I love communication, and I love law. And now I have an answer, because I got to, contribute to research on a topic that is interdisciplinary between communication and the law. So I really do hope that you will enjoy the publication and you will read our book. Now, during this presentation today, I will talk about how communication contributes to the realization of children's rights, and when children are heard, what does it mean really for children's rights? So not long ago, a common saying that we heard very often insisted on where the child's place is. And we used to say, or we used to hear a lot, that children should be seen and not heard. Now, today we recognize how profoundly mistaken that notion was, because the realization has dawned on us, on all of us, that communication, which is the act of listening to a child and amplifying that child's voice, is a vital tool for protecting and realizing children's rights. When we allow children to speak, and when we genuinely hear what they have to say, then that can transform their abstract rights into real-world impact. A child's testimony in a criminal hearing can expose an injustice. A child's idea can spark policy change. A child's plea can mobilize a whole community. In the arena of children's rights, communication is not a trivial matter. It is a human rights imperative. So modern human rights law leaves no doubt about this, because children have the right to be heard and to be taken seriously. We know this from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, from Article 12, and this is the first treaty that enshrines this principle in its core. Now, Article 12 of the UNCRC establishes that every child that has the capability of forming their own views should be heard. They have the right to express those views freely and in all matters that impact them, and that child's opinion and view must be given due weight. This is a very important component of this provision. Now, in other words, listening to children, communicating with children is not an optional goodwill. It is a binding legal obligation on states. So in practice, this principle has spurred reforms toward child-friendly justice, specialized trainings for judges, specialized training for experts on how to talk to children, how to interview children, allowing support persons in courts in many, many countries, and ensuring that the atmosphere that we create for children in these very stressful situations is less and less intimidating. The underlying idea is very simple, but very revolutionary at the same time. And that is that justice is not truly just if the voices of those who are the most affected are absent, in this case, the children. So international law has evolved even further, because in 2014, the third optional protocol to the CRC, optional protocol 3, came into force, establishing a communications procedure which allows children to directly submit their complaints about rights violations to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And this development, which is essentially a child-friendly international court of complaint, reinforces that notion that children are independent rights holders. This is really what the spirit of the convention is about. Before the convention, we had tools that were protecting children, the Declaration on the Rights of the Child, but we were viewing children as objects of protection, not as autonomous rights holders. This is a huge change that happened in 1989. And the communication procedure is the realization of this change in view. Now, communication is not only about civic participation. At the most urgent level, it is a lifeline of protection. When a child is in danger, when they are suffering from abuse, when their rights are violated, their ability to communicate, the forum that they have where they can communicate these issues is incredibly important. This can literally save their lives. One very powerful example is the existence of child helplines globally. These are generally free 24/7 telephone lines or online services that children have access to. They can contact to talk about problems. One very important is that I want to mention the Child Helpline International, which currently works in over 140 states. And it is a huge network spanning these 140 countries that was founded on the belief that children themselves are in the best position to identify their own problems and where they need help. And according to the statistics of Child Helpline International, over 22 million children worldwide contacted them last year, which means that there is an immense need and an immense impact that these helplines have for children. Now, of course, protecting children from harm is fundamental, but the impact of communication goes even further. It improves the quality of children's rights and the quality of all of our lives. When policymakers, educators, legislators, and caregivers actively seek children's opinion and they respect their perspective, the results are remarkably positive. Participation simply leads to better decisions, stronger inclusion, and more resilient societies. And this is not just an idealistic slogan that we talk about. It is a conclusion supported by real-life evidence and research. Article 12 reminds us that children should be listened to not only because it is their right, but because it simply leads to smarter and more just decisions for everyone. Now, there are a few real-world examples that we could talk about, or I could just briefly mention. In Pakistan's Swat Valley, a young girl who refused to stay silent when the Taliban banned girls from schools. And Malala was just 11 when she started blogging about her experience and about her right to education. And when the extremists attempted to assassinate her and silence her, her voice only grew louder. She was just one single child who raised her voice and raised her opinion. And when she got the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 17, she said that this award is not just for me. It is for those forgotten children who want education, those voiceless children who want change. I'm here to stand up for their rights to raise their voice. So this also shows us the impact of communication. We see that also in climate change. Children and teenagers are becoming more and more active in the discussion about climate. And we have seen the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child in 2023 issued a new guidance on the rights of the child and the environment, a general comment, which was the first general comment where children were consulted. They had the input from over 16,000 children from around the world on climate change and environment and how it impacts them. Well, we can also talk about children parliaments and local change. I have read in research about an Indian village where the attendance of children from that village was extremely low going to school, and then the children came up with the solution or the problem why the attendance was so low, simply because there was a footbridge that was too difficult for children to cross and too dangerous. So a lot of them simply didn't cross the bridge and didn't go to school. So when they came with the solution to their council, they actually built a new footbridge and the attendance started to rise. Or as we heard yesterday from our colleagues from Croatia, children and their impact directly changed the criminal code and the age of consent in Croatia from 14 to 15, because The idea came from children that 15 or 16 would be even better, because 14 is simply too low of an age to be able to consent to any kind of sexual activity. So all of these examples are prime examples on how, where children communicate, we can incite real world change, and how children can be agents of change. Now, of course, there are a lot of barriers to being heard when it comes to children. And just to mention a few of those, first of all, cultural bias or adult bias. A lot of the times, and in many, many cultures, children are still kind of viewed as not really agents of change or participants of a serious discussion. It is still assumed that adults know best, and they can make informed decisions on behalf of children. Now, this is not necessarily the case, because children's views, when they are overlooked, it has been proven time and time again that that opinion, that weight is missing from the decision making. So the invisibility of children in policy making is a huge issue and is a huge barrier for children. So overcoming this, I believe, is a profound shift, because when we start respecting children as bearers of rights and opinions, not just as passive dependents, then we will see real change. When it comes to legal and administrative hurdles, even when the laws recognize children's participatory rights, there may be procedural barriers. Court processes might not accommodate a child's schedule or emotional needs. A lot of the times, administrative forms or hearings are too complex. The language is simply too complex for a child to understand. So in some cases, the children are not even informed that they have a right to speak. So while they technically have that right and they have that seat at a table, they effectively remain voiceless. So we must remove these legal and bureaucratic barriers that keep children silent. Now, the next thing is the lack of accessibility in communication. Not all children communicate in the same way. If we only listen to one kind of voice, we will miss many. Children with disabilities are a prime example of this. A deaf child or a child with speech difficulties will have perfectly valid views, but they might require sign language. They might require assisted technology to express those views, and we need to provide those sources for them. If no accommodation is provided, their voices are effectively silenced. Similarly, very young children, a lot of the times, and I see this in legislation, and this is also what the book talks about, our legislation will say children should be consulted above the age of 14. Well, a child below that age will also have an opinion, and they also have that right based on the UNCRC. There is no age limit to expressing your opinion. There is no age limit for a child to have that right. The question is, do we allow them to do so, and what kind of communication it will be? It might be a child who will draw a picture. It might be a child who will express their opinion through play, through different means of communication, not necessarily verbal communication. Language barriers can also silence children. Minority children who do not speak the dominant language might not have the opportunity to speak, for example. So I think to truly hear all children, we must adopt inclusive communication technologies and practices. So it means embracing alternative forms of communication as well, like art, like play, like drama, or digital media, that can all be very powerful in children's communication. In any case, no child's voice should be silenced or excluded due to a disability, language, or age, or anything else. Another thing is a fear or lack of confidence. Many children are afraid of expressing those views because they are concerned about kind of being mistreated or not being taken seriously by authorities. So creating that safe space, that empowering space for children is incredibly important. And then I want to mention something that is also, I think, very prevalent in today's age, and that is tokenism. In a lot of the cases, we see that children are consulted on a surface level, but we don't really care what they say. It is really for us to check a box or pat ourselves on the back that the child was asked. But when that child is asked, and it is only for show, it's not enough. It is not in line with the spirit of the convention. So, if a consultation is conducted with children, that child should be ensured that their opinion will have due weight. They should have a feedback loop. They should understand whether that opinion was taken further, was taken seriously. And it might be the case that the opinion will not incite change, but that child should be explained why not. So we need that child-friendly communication when we communicate cases and case outcomes, so children understand what happened, because true respect means taking children's opinions seriously, even if they are inconvenient, challenging, or they demand change. Now, how can we build a world where listening to children is routine, systematic, and meaningful? There are some strategies, just very briefly. I think I want to mention a couple of them, and I will come to the conclusion. One of them is education. I think empowering children begins by letting them know that their voice matters. This means integrating human rights education into school curricula, including lessons on the UNCRC. So the child knows that they have this right, that they have this opinion that matters to someone. The second is training professionals and parents. Every adult who speaks with children or for children should be equipped to communicate with children, and this means widespread training for children's rights and participation for teachers, social workers, people who work with children in the justice system, judges, police, healthcare workers, and beyond. So all of this is incredibly important. The second is institutional change. Having a structural change, so not just a single child who has an opinion that matters ad hoc, but having a structure, having an institution. Children's Rights Ombudsperson is a great example of this. An independent authority that will advocate for children, that consult directly children for policy change. At the municipal level, we see youth advisory boards in many countries already. The bottom line is the more we embed the voices of children into governance matters and governance structures, they are less and less likely to be overlooked. The other one is leveraging technology. We have seen that we are in a digital age. So a lot of the times, children, by simply posting a video on TikTok or Instagram, they can have an immense reach immediately without having those gatekeepers. And a lot of the times we ignore these technologies when we talk about communication. And finally, changing the narrative, shifting that narrative. This is, I think, the most subtle but the most important thing that we have to do. Changing the view that society views children. We need to celebrate those examples, like the one I mentioned from Croatia. We need to know about them, where children's opinions led to real life change. So I think the narrative also should change from speaking for children to speaking with children. So having the children having a place at the table. Now, in conclusion, I think the book that we have published is very much an interdisciplinary book. However, I do consider it as an incredibly important contribution to human rights, to children's rights, because communication, while it is an interdisciplinary matter, communication is the beating heart of children's rights. It is through communication, open ears and open dialogue that the ideals that we have ratified in treaties and laws translate into real-world improvements on children's rights. We have seen that when children are heard, better decisions are made, better protections are offered, and better futures are forged. A justice system that listens to the voice of the child is more just. A policy crafted with youth input is more effective. A child who can speak up is safer from harm than the one kept silent. And in the end, I think every framework, every reform, every legislation, every safeguard exists for a simple purpose: to honor the dignity of each child as a full human being today, whose voice matters in the present, not in the future. I think very few people have articulated it as clearly as Janusz Korczak, whose contribution led or inspired the adoption of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, who said that children are not the people of tomorrow, but are the people of today. They have the right to be taken seriously and the right to be treated with tenderness and respect, They should be allowed to grow into whoever they were meant to be. The unknown person inside them is our hope for the future. So I think if we carry this insight, this spirit into our laws, into our institutions, and into our everyday communication with children, we are closer to a world where their rights are lived realities and their voices shape a more just future for us all. Thank you so much.